Hi guys, welcome to Chemo Glow, where the glow doesn't define me, I define the glow. Thank you for joining me for our Facebook Live event. Please visit our YouTube channel, Chemo Glow, and subscribe. I need more subscribers, y'all. I have so many on Facebook. I would love to have as many people to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click, share, like, follow, and you can find our podcast on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are available. So I'm excited about my guest tonight, guys. I actually listened to the podcast twice. And of course, the podcast is called Who Takes Care of Me? A Caregiver's Tale. Well, our guest didn't ask herself that question when she found out that her dad was diagnosed with cancer. Instead, she moved him into her home and became an advocate of his care. Now, as a clinical social worker, she's used to taking care of others. But what happens when you need to be taken care of, regardless of whether you know it or not? Guys, please welcome my guest, Tanisha Sanders. Yay! We're so excited to have you.
Hi, Regina.
Now, is your
Thank
dog going to
you.
come in and join us today?
He's right here. That's my assistant.
Oh, my husband just took my dog out, like just now, right now. So I'm so used to that. So,
Yeah.
welcome to my little podcast live show. Thank you for coming on. I
Thank
know
you for having me.
I know it was short notice because I just put your podcast out, but I think
hmm
it's important to get the caregiver's view, especially in the month of October when everybody is looking at breast cancer and different cancers. Next month is lung cancer
hmm
awareness month. You know, cancer to me doesn't have a month. It's just recognized
hmm
months. So it's good to have you on here. And I really enjoyed our podcast. For someone who had nothing to say, sure did say a lot.
Thank you. I mean, of course, I would be here. This is totally important for everybody to have this kind of possibility to, get support, even remotely. So, thank you.
Thank you.
How you been?
I've been good. I was just about to tell the guests right before the podcast, I was nervous. And you was like, okay, let's take a deep breath. Like,
hmm
self, right? Mental health is
hmm
important. So when we're talking about a caregiver's tale, I want to touch on a little bit about the podcast since it was released just barely a week ago and tell
hmm
a little bit about how you came into the glow. And again, what I mean by the glow, when someone's diagnosed, a loved one, some people yourself, how did you find out about your father's cancer?
So, how did I?
Did he
Well,
ever
I was
tell
on.
you?
Well, he called me on the phone and told me he had a lump on his neck,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like a mass right here. I don't want people to get worried that if they have a little knot that's cancer. That's not what that means, right?
Yeah.
But he had a knot that sort of grew over some time. And, my dad, and I think this is a really important part, he just didn't follow up with his,
Mm-hmm.
regular doctor's appointments. I think if he had gone and done regular follow up and preventative care, we maybe could have found these things out beforehand. But by the time he told me, he had like a little lump that was growing and growing and growing. And in October, his doctor called me and then I think my sisters too. And he said, basically that he had stage 4 cancer and that it was very serious and he needed support.
Mm-hmm.
He actually was a caregiver for my grandmother who, was in her 90s and, had a bit of dementia. So that's how we found out. That's how
Okay.
me, Vanessa, and Nicole found out.
So your father was an actual caregiver
Mm-hmm.
to his mother. How long was he doing that for?
Years.
Years. So when he found out that he had cancer,
Mm-hmm.
and then you guys found out what was going on, what was the next step for you?
Well, you know, um, so I think it's interesting. We have these two different stories of
Yeah.
caregiving here. We have my dad,
Yes.
who's a caregiver, and when we have me.
Yes.
And with my dad, oh, I have an echo. Um,
Okay.
when my dad, he had trouble finding ways to take care of himself.
Mm-hmm.
So when he found out that he had cancer, he didn't want to do anything about it. He thought he could get help at Memorial Sloan in New York.
Uh-huh.
And he thought that he could handle taking care of my grandmother at the same time as, getting cancer treatment. Stage 4 really didn't have a meaning for us.
Yes.
But we decided, me, Vanessa, and Nicole, we decided that he couldn't do that. He couldn't take care of my grandmother, who was basically, she was at times incontinent and struggled with, moving or ambulating. So I told him, come to Maryland and I will help you. Like, we'll get you set up here. And he didn't really want to do it,
So
you know.
by getting him set up in Maryland, that means you had to get your grandmother set up where she needed to be because now you're
Well,
her caregiver.
right. So actually, my aunt, she didn't hesitate,
Yeah.
and she came from Alabama to pick her up. So there's more information about that, but I think it was ultimately a coordinated care.
Mm-hmm.
Like a bunch of people in the family sort of um, coming together to sort of help to get this thing to happen.
Yeah.
And I think I told you in the last time when we were speaking, he wasn't going to come if my sister didn't get on the phone with him.
I'd see Vanessa is that person of she's my why girl, like why, and she'll talk you into
Mm-hmm.
in a way. And I
Mm-hmm.
think we're sort of alike where I don't have time for that. You gotta get in this car, we're gonna go and we're gonna get you the care that you need. But it takes
Mm-hmm.
all those different personalities. So it was yourself, Vanessa, and your younger sister, Nicole. Um,
Right. That had the conversation, but it was me and
mm-hmm,
Vanessa that ultimately went to New York so Vanessa talked to him,
mm-hmm,
and, she encouraged him. I was talking to him, but not in the way to sit and, really sort of beg it out with him. And ultimately he decided, yeah, okay, I'll do this.
good. That is good.
And
How long did
he
it take
came.
y'all to coordinate that?
For him to decide to come to Maryland, or for him to get services in Maryland?
For him to get services in Maryland? Like how long did that
About a week.
about a week? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now when you moved him to this 5 bedroom house. Was it a big spot where you used to sharing your space? Or how did it
Um, well, yeah, the house that I live in right now, um, it's a pretty big house, but it's
uh-huh.
not, he had his own room. He wanted to bring things, like he brought 2 huge TVs. He brought a 55-inch TV and then another TV. He wanted to bring a couch. And I think this this sort of goes to what I'm talking about when I say people can't
Mm-hmm.
conceptualize what stage 4 really means.
Yeah.
Right? Because at the
Yeah.
same time as you're saying to yourself, oh my God, this person is telling me, the doctor's telling me this is terminal.
Yeah.
At the same time as they're telling me that, I was making plans to go see Earth, Wind, and Fire with my dad in Atlantic City. Do you know what I'm saying?
You
Right?
were still
And
making
and he was
plans.
planning, and he was bringing, like, he was thinking, I was thinking about next spring, coming spring, him
Uh-huh.
getting a fishing license and stuff. Um, so at the local pond or whatever.
Uh-huh.
So he wanted to bring a lot of stuff. We brought,
Mm-hmm.
some stuff we
Mm-hmm.
couldn't bring. We also were under the time constraint. We came to do something. We're trying to get you from New York to Maryland and get you in treatment. We don't have time to have a moving van with, like,
Uh-huh. So
you know,
within moving him into the home, when was his first appointment? Like when he
Gosh, I don't even know.
fell
It
in?
was like when it was like right away. I mean,
Oh,
these things were happening like so before when I knew that the date that he was coming,
wow. Uh-huh.
I started working on John Hopkins behind the scenes,
Okay.
right?
Yeah. And with that, we're working on John Hopkins behind the scenes. He's coming. Is he reluctant to actually go and get care, or is he like, let's go, I'm ready?
Yeah, like he was gonna beat it.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you, up until the almost like a week before he died, not even a
Uh-huh.
week before he died, he said he was gonna beat it.
I met your dad. When I tell you he's a
Hmm.
cool dude, like he was so cool. I see where Vanessa gets it from. Like I see
Hmm.
where he gets it from. And he was always positive. You in the podcast you talked about he didn't just care for your grandmother, he cared for the community.
Everybody.
So I know he wasn't gonna stop.
He
With it,
was sick here sending people money.
are you serious? Wow. Because in his mind, that's why you live. You like to give. Like Vanessa always talked about how your dad was a giver, and he'll give his
Hmm.
last, even if he doesn't have it. So
Right.
becoming his caregiver, how was that?
He grew into that, by the way, Regina.
Yes,
He was
he did.
always very loving, but I think, you know, you have to leave space for a person to grow into who they're supposed to be. And about like, my son is he's 18, about, you know, 15 or 16 years ago,
Uh huh.
he found his footing and he was able to give in a way that he had never been able to give before. And he made up for the years that he wasn't able to give in the right way. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying?
Well, you tell in your podcast, you say in the podcast that not only is your dad a giver, but you guys were good friends and you worked to being good friends. Like at the end you were pretty good friends.
Oh,
So
yeah.
how did that happen? How did that come about? You guys were really good friends and you had that bond. Because, a mother, excuse me, not a mother, but a father and daughter bond is amazing. I see my girls loving on my husband all the time. Um, but that bond is really strong. So how did y'all become good friends?
Well, I'm a daddy's girl. Anybody who
Exactly.
knows me, that I'm a daddy's girl.
I was
I still
trying to
have
get
his.
that out.
I
That's
still
what
have.
Vanessa says.
I still have daddy in my phone to this day for his phone number. Yes,
Really?
and I'm gonna be 50, right? But he earned it. He earned like I think I was in the position to give him an opportunity to
Hmm.
redeem himself,
Okay.
from his younger years of not being able to be present. And um, I'm sorry, I got distracted.
That's
So,
okay.
um, so when so I gave him the opportunity to be present, and
Hmm.
what he did was he was able to be there for me in ways that allowed us to so he used to drive me back and forth to work,
Uh-huh.
and we used to get coffee, and he helped me when I was having a hard time with my raising my son because I'm a single parent.
Uh-huh.
We like the same type of movies, you know what I mean. um so I don't know, we spent a lot of time, we were just very cool, we spent a lot of time just hanging out.
And getting to know
And I
each
lived in New York up
other. Uh-huh.
until 2016. So all that time we were getting coffee
Mm-hmm.
and, going to movies, and, you know, I was getting conflict over him giving my son McDonald's when I had made meals. I'm telling him not to give him McDonald's, and Trey is scamming him into giving him Kentucky Fried Chicken and McDonald's. But
He's doing well. Go
I know
ahead.
that
Go ahead.
people are asking us questions about what was Janice's feeling when he beat cancer. So I think my dad, I think that story comes in with daddy being the type of person that was physically very athletic.
Yeah.
You know, he was very athletic, even into his senior years. Like he was just like, like strong physically.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he couldn't, he noticed that he was slowing down, but he couldn't conceptualize the idea that any sickness would take him out.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I remember as a little kid him walking on his hands
Mm-hmm.
across the room, over
Oh.
upside down.
Uh-huh. And let me just make a quick note. Those answers or questions that you're seeing is coming from our producer.
Oh, okay.
And I told her before I did this that she is going to be kicking me questions out and I'm going to get to those questions because I think it's also therapeutic for your sisters to hear this too. How
Hmm.
you not only became a caregiver, but how was it being with your dad during that time? So, how was
Oh,
during the time when he first had his first treatment with he received what treatments did he receive?
so it's been a while now, but
Mm-hmm.
um, he received chemotherapy.
Uh-huh.
I think it's
Mm-hmm.
immunotherapy,
Yeah.
radiation. Um, I think those are the three that
Okay.
he ended up. Mhm.
And with those, how was the first couple of chemotherapy? How was the first treatments? How did they make him feel?
They wore him out.
Warm out.
The first one, because the first chemotherapy was a pack.
Mm-hmm.
So like he took the injury. So one of the things that happens when you get cancer and you're doing chemotherapy is they install a port,
Mm-hmm.
right? And a port a device that's underneath the skin that allows them to tap into giving you chemo without puncturing you every single time, which by the way, that port closes over and they sometimes have to puncture you anyway.
I had that. They call the stuff Drano. Like when you say my port is closed, they're like get the Drano because that port when it gets closed, what they have to do to open it. And I actually had an infection in my port. And now my girls look at my port scar and they're like, "Mommy, you have a boo boo." And I said, "Oh, that's my lifeline." So that port is your lifeline during that time. So during that time when he was receiving his treatment, and those first chemotherapies wore him out, wore him
Hmm.
completely out. What advice would you give someone who is a caregiver to their parent coming into the situation? James and Tasha just asked that question. Like, what advice would you give a caregiver?
Use your supports.
Uh huh.
Be honest. I think I said this during the podcast. Be honest with your job, the right people at your job, right? Not
That's
everybody.
important. Not everybody.
Not
I made
everybody.
that mistake of doing that one time, and someone really said something that was off-putting to me, and I had to shut my door and get her straight, and then leave it alone. So not everybody needs to know, but when you have that support, so having the support at your job, and were you the only? Your sisters live in another state, correct?
Well, well, wait. Let me say this really quickly
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't say this during the podcast. So
Okay.
I have two best friends,
Uh
right?
huh.
But one person. I have one person besides Trey's dad, which I don't talk to him every day anymore, but
Uh
I talk to my best friend every single day,
huh.
right? Either text or call, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily but that was like an outlet, right?
Okay.
So I think that, a caregiver, you're right. You don't know that you need support. I'm not that type of person. I told you during our conversation before.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really thinking of that, but there were certain things that were sort of built into my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like talking to my friend every day. It wasn't always about cancer. Sometimes it was about a stupid, meme or,
Mm-hmm.
something that I'm thinking about. I also worked out a tremendous amount. We had all these challenges at work, and I was working out like crazy
Mm-hmm.
every day, trying to beat my boss, who's like a beast, right? Like doing 20,000 steps every day, right? And, you know, I, I didn't really think a lot,
Uh-huh.
I wasn't really thinking so much. I had family members that, like I told you about my uncle, who
Mm-hmm.
just sort of came through, and he took the focus of my dad. Like, he made my dad feel better because he
Uh-huh.
was sort of chatting with my dad about stuff that, like, men their age sort of chat about. Right?
Stuff that you can't relate right now, but
Right.
okay.
That I'm not thinking about, right? Because, I'm working crazy. Like, I'm working a
Mm-hmm.
lot of hours. So I think that a caregiver, as a caregiver, you sort of need to, you know, use the resources that you already have in place in your life, right? Don't shut people out. You may not be that overly emotional person or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but don't be afraid to say yes when somebody wants you. Can I take him to this appointment?
Yeah.
Yes, you can.
Please do.
Right? Right? Use your Cancer Society, American
I,
Cancer Society. Use your
yes.
American Cancer Society.
If you guys don't know, American Cancer Society does great things in the community. And one of the things that they did for you was provided transportation um, to and from doctor's appointments. And I think you, during our interview, you said you had like 20 rides.
20 rides, no questions asked.
No questions asked. That means
No
pick up,
questions asked.
drop off, bring back home, right? And why did
And
you need to use American Cancer Society to take your father to and from different appointments? Were you still working at the time?
yes, I was working my two jobs,
Mm.
right? Because I'm a single mom, right? And that's
Yeah.
what we do, right? And um sometimes part of cancer treatment is that appointments don't occur on the weekend. Well, for
Mm-hmm.
the most part, right?
Yeah.
And you need to get somebody at a doctor's appointment for a port or for a follow-up or for a
Mm-hmm.
CT scan in the middle of the day, right?
Yeah.
And I'm at work,
Yeah.
right? And I have a good boss, but how many times is he going to be like, yeah, go ahead, Tanisha, going out the door? No, he's not going to do that. So they would come. I talked with the social worker, and they gave me a list, and then I called American Cancer Society, and they didn't put me through a whole bunch of paperwork. They
Mm-hmm.
made me, like, sort of fill out the basics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I could call a couple of days ahead of time or one day ahead of time and say, can I get this appointment? Can you pick him up? They come to the house. If they didn't have somebody local
Uh-huh.
that was willing to volunteer, and I think that's the part that's really important if we volunteer, right? They had a little bit of a service
Mm-hmm.
with some kind of, like, not Uber, but like, something like a taxi or whatever,
Yeah.
that would
That
come in, pick him up, drop him at the site. And then if I couldn't get back, after work to just go and get him and bring him here, they bring him back
Oh
to
wow.
the house. And we're talking from Montgomery County to Baltimore, which is, this is like, I don't know, 45 minutes, an hour ride.
Yeah.
Um, so that was really, like, I think all those different parts were really important.
Yeah. Well, you see here, you kind of answered this question already, but when you're a caregiver, how do you give the adult their independence? And I think by your uncle coming down and he would spend a couple of days with you, right?
Yeah, he'd spend like 3 days, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he would, I mean, I have new respect for my uncles. I'm gonna be really honest. They're very easygoing. They
Mm-hmm.
weren't so easygoing when I was growing up, but they are very chill now. You know what I mean? You know, they'll let you live, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is I listened to my father. That was the other way I gave him independence, right?
Okay.
Because, he's not a child.
Mm-hmm.
He's a grown man who had decisions and made choices, and I'm helping him,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I spoke to this on when we had our podcast. I said, Regina, my dad's an easygoing dude, right? He's not trying to. He wasn't trying to give me a hard time, right?
Yeah.
He was just trying to live. He's like, let me just live, right?
Yeah.
So I really didn't. I didn't hover.
Yeah.
right? If he asked me to do something, I did it. If he asked for something to go in a certain way, I allowed that to happen. And I made sure, like, I'm the strength for his words. I'm not my strength instead of, do you get what I'm saying?
I love that. Say it again. You are the strength for his words. That's
Right.
right there. That's
Right. Like, yeah, that's the power. Like, I bring the power because I was well. And if
uh-huh.
they weren't listening, I'd help them to listen, his doctors, anybody else. But it was really what he wanted,
Mm-hmm.
how he
You
wanted
had
to
to
live.
have those conversations when
Yeah.
dying. What kind of conversations did you have about his wishes?
Well, 2 days before he died, like, so my dad, I think I told you this too. I was telling
Yeah.
you that he wanted a tremendous funeral. Tremendous funeral.
If it
White
was left.
horses with a band. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I didn't have the money for that. I wasn't going to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to him about it, and I was just like, Daddy, I needed to do that. I needed to have that conversation with him because I needed it to be honorable of what he wanted,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I couldn't just say, oh, I'm going to do what I want to do, blah, 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 just because he's not here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had this conversation. I said, Dad, can I cremate you? I said, I'm going to use what we have and I'm going to cremate you. And he said, yeah, okay, do that.
Yeah.
Do whatever you need to do. And I did.
Mm-hmm.
And then, that brings us to the funeral, which was,
Oh my goodness! So on the podcast and on my glow moments, like I had this glow moment after the funeral, like before the funeral. First of all, I was waiting for the family car to come pick me up on Zoom because that's how the production was. You guys, it was amazing, and even the pastor said you guys were like the Charlie Angels of the group. You had
mm-hmm.
the introduction. You had, okay, Vanessa was the person that did the announcement and the eulogy and everything else. Your sister was controlling the PowerPoint presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Wrote everything. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, if you leave it up to Vanessa, there's always going to be a dance production number, even at a funeral, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were pre-recorded, and she had a songstress, like you said in the podcast. If y'all could have BBCC wine, and they would have been there too. Like
Oh my God.
it was beautiful, and then seeing the camera that was just placed like trained in your house, trained on his hat, tilted sideways, his urn. It was just beautiful. Everything was beautiful. It was a wonderful send off. Like I believe you did a amazing job. You girls did, ladies did amazing. Well, you are his girls. Y'all did an amazing job. But having that conversation to say, "Hey, this is what I can do. Is it okay?" Because like you said, I could have did whatever once he passed, but you wanted to
Mm-hmm.
be sure that he was okay. One of the things that you talked about in the podcast, and I know that one of my friends has gone through this. I give this
Mm-hmm.
advice all the time. And this is just me. My loved ones were transitioning to another place. When they were passing over, I would tell my loved ones that it's okay. My mom did it with my dad, and I swear once she said, "TC, I'm good. You did well. We'll be fine." He took his last breath. And I tell
Mm-hmm.
people when they're asking me, "Well, what do you say?" And I'm like, "This is me. This is to release. Release that person from that burden to stay here." And that's how I was with my three family members that had passed away.
Mm-hmm.
How did you handle that with you? You talk about the transition and going, helping him ease into the next place. How was that for you?
You know, so So I talk a lot about denial, right? Throughout this whole
Mm-hmm.
thing, I'm always telling you, "Oh, I didn't think he was going to die. I didn't think he was going to die, right? I wasn't sure. I was like, But shortly after he started chemotherapy, we came into we came in for our standard appointment. His tumors were shrinking, and the doctor told us, Tanisha, he said the tumors are growing and we got to change the chemo, which is pretty standard. That doesn't mean that a person is dying, right? It just means that the chemo that they're using really has to, change over to something else, right? But in that moment, me and Dad, we were sitting there, and I'm not a crier, although I've become one, right? I just started weeping, like the tears. Like I let the guy get out of the room, and then the tears just started coming down. I better be careful because it'll start coming down now. And my dad said, "What are you crying for?" Right? But in that second, like after that, my dad sort of he sort of lost a little bit of hope. He just sort of started going down. And I think that's around the time that my uncle showed up around. And, like the next appointment, I told the doctor, I said, is this something like, should we be preparing for him to die? Or, are you just telling us that, what do you explain this to us? And he explained it to us, but he sort of, like fluffed it a little bit. So I think after that point where his tumor started to grow, me and Dad both had a reality check. Mm-hmm. Right? Because, you're not talking about someone who's in the early stages of cancer. You're talking about someone who myth says that if you're in stage 4, that's it. Mm-hmm. They tell you that basically the cancer treatment that you're getting is basically to give you a little bit of time and quality of life. It's not to cure. Mm-hmm. Right? So at that point, I started, just my expectations were lower. Yeah. And I started to accept more the fact that he could possibly not make it. Mm-hmm. Right? And that's like really important, because if you're in denial and you see that this person is declining, you can't do what you need to do to take care of yourself or them. You're like sort of still making plans for, Earth, Wind, and Fire.
You still thinking about going Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Right? You still thinking about Earth, Wind, and Fire. You're not thinking about like, comfort. You're not thinking about being straightforward and honest and truth. You're not getting in connection with your feelings. You're sort of holding on to something that doesn't exist. And so you can't, and I think there's an innate like wisdom inside of a person that tells them what they need to do with a person that they love to start to, walk with them to the end. Yeah. But you can't do that if you're not
part of grief. Like it's the stages of grief. First we are denying what's going on, or we're in shock. We're in shock. This is not happening. I still remember when your sister called me, and her thing is like, we still have more moments and more memories. And I knew that what I needed to do at that moment was just listen, because she was still in that shock and denial process. And then, then the anger happened. And all this happened if you know your sister, all of it happened in that one conversation, right? Before we hung up the phone. And that acceptance is hard to come by. And I'm pretty sure that your sister's not there yet. But that acceptance is very hard to come by. But all those stages of grief can happen in a blink of the eye. You're really like, okay, I'm okay. We're making plans for Earth, Wind, and Fire. And then all of a sudden the quality of life starts to turn. And then when I talk about the glow, when I'm talking about the glow, when you're being diagnosed, like when they say you have cancer, at that moment, you don't look like you have cancer. Mm-mm. Like you said, your father just had a knot on his neck. He was still his same self. And Vanessa called me. She was like, yeah, when I had someone that I wanted a nurse to talk to you guys, he's like, Tanisha is not hearing it. And I was like, well, I'm just gonna let her talk and see. But again, you're making those plans. And so when you were making those plans with your dad and you knew that those plans was going to change, your father actually had a stroke right before he passed. Am I correct?
Yeah. So he declined. The doctor told him, no, don't give up. Don't stop fighting.
Yeah.
Um, but and so he came back a little, but he didn't ever really come back all the way.
Okay.
Right. And he ultimately, it's hard for me to like remember everything that
Yeah.
happened now, because I'm a master compartmentalizer.
That's what makes you this awesome clinical social worker.
Compartmentalize it, put it in a box in the corner. um, got other stuff to do. But I think so. We started the new chemo, and when we started the new chemo, it kept growing. The cancer kept growing. It spread to the bones in the back of his neck, and his neck was hurting. And you know, like I don't know, maybe a couple of months later, he had like maybe he took two chemos
Uh-huh.
after the change, and then he had a stroke. Right. And we didn't know he had a stroke. I didn't know he had a stroke. He didn't know, like you don't know what these things look like.
Yeah.
So he was just sort of laying in the bed. And
Mm-hmm.
he could still talk, but he was just he lost his mobility.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him, like I think the day that the night before I sent him to the hospital, I felt like I went in his room and I cleaned it up.
Mm.
And I think I cleaned it up because I knew that's it.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know if I was thinking he's gonna die, but I was thinking I'm gonna have to have somebody come in here and take him out.
Yeah.
And when he went in the hospital, I think I told you, he was at the hospital and he became adamant that he had to come home. And again, I felt you know, one, I don't love to be pushed around,
Yeah.
right? I don't like to be like, demand things for me, right?
Yeah.
Especially if I'm doing for you. And that doesn't go away because I love you, right?
Yeah.
But don't be like, don't be demanding things from me. But he was like, Tanisha, I gotta come home. And I felt like he's gonna die.
Yeah.
But he didn't say that. I asked him and he said, absolutely not, right? He said, no, but I could look in his eyes. And this is not the first person in my family who had passed away. My mother had passed away when I was 20. When the last time I saw Nana, my grandmother, my mother's mother, I could tell in my gut that there wasn't much more years to her, even though that lady was tough. She
Yeah.
hung in there for over 100, right?
Is that
So
the one I met? Uh, she had a very sharp, clever mouth that was very funny. Did I meet her? Was that the one that I met?
yes.
Vanessa's letting me know.
And
Oh
Grandma
yes, Vanessa
Queen,
says yes.
and my Grandma Queen is the lady. That was the
Yes.
lady. Yeah, you're not gonna get. But my Nana was, that's where we get it from. Like, so when he told me that he needed to come home, I gotta say, it's all about the systems that you choose to work with.
Mm-hmm.
John Hopkins is an amazing system. They didn't save my dad's life, but his experience could have been much more painful and much more disjointed.
Yeah.
And I had an amazing experience with them. Not doctors get back to you. The treatment is effective. It's clean. Even during COVID, there was compassion and kindness
Mm-hmm.
for the caretaker as well as the patient. They had someone sitting with my dad and had his phone so he could FaceTime with me after he had the stroke, you know? So,
Oh.
like, it's all about the systems, the hospice. They didn't give me a whole runaround with a lot of paperwork. You know, I filled out a couple of papers. The lady at John Hopkins put it together, and they brought the hospice information, the hospice equipment in one day. Bam, set it up, done, everything. The nurse showed up the next day. Bam, done. And he was home. He was
Yeah,
home.
I've been through hospice 3 times, and when they show up, they show up. It's like, okay, bed, oxygen. What do you need?
Bag of pills,
Yeah,
everything.
everything you need.
Everything you need. Bag of pills, gloves. I mean, we were at a shortage of gloves. We were at a shortage of masks.
Hmm.
The hospice brought in the glass. They were like, we're at a shortage, but they found the gloves. They
Hmm.
found, the mask. And so the world is sort of like going crazy in pandemic, but they're finding what they need to help you
Hmm.
help this person. Even the lady, she sort of taught me how to do the poop, and you know how I felt about the poop. The nurse,
Believe
she
me, I
told
had to
me
do it. All my loved ones, how you have to. It's a special way to do it to
it
get.
is a special way. It's a tutorial. Just like find out how to do the poop, because if you don't, right?
It's gonna be everywhere. Know how to roll it. I totally know how to do it.
So all those things sort of made it like doable
Hmm.
to transition from and help him step to the place where he was gonna he was crossing over
So before you did that, you guys had a Zoom call
during that.
during that. So when he came home, the Zoom
Hmm.
call was when he was at home. You know.
Yeah, he died the night after the Zoom call.
So how did that go? How do you reach out because it's COVID times? So how do you reach out to everyone? Because I know your sisters wanted to be there, but because of travel, because of COVID, how did you get everyone on that Zoom call?
So I told you this as well. We have a good family.
Yeah.
Now they don't. They fight.
Yeah.
They fight. Part of my family, they will throw hands so fast, right? You know what I'm saying? But we have a very traditional good family for the most
Uh-huh.
part, right?
Uh-huh.
And in times of need, they will do what you ask them to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my dad has given to pretty much every member of this family,
Mm-hmm.
especially on his side, right?
Yeah.
And when there came an opportunity to have a conversation with him. And I think this is also about being ready and knowing where you're at with the person who is passing. We're not really talking a lot about people who go on to get better. We're talking a lot about a person that's passing, because it's a
Mm-hmm.
different, I guess, experience for a person who is going to get better. And there's a lot of people that get better, right? A
Mm-hmm.
lot.
I just had this conversation with someone. I had a friend who called me and asked me if I would speak to her dear friend, and I knew the difference between our cancers. Like she was stage 4, and it came back stronger. And I know when I was going through, if you would have matched me up with someone to talk to that was either, on the other side or this, I couldn't relate, and it just didn't feel right. And so I
Mm-hmm.
didn't say no to the person, but I said, ask her if that's what she wants, if that's what she needs. Because if you know that you're about to pass on, the last thing you want to do is be talking to a survivor of of what's going on. So I totally understand that. So getting your family together for the Zoom call.
So Vanessa and Nicole are effective.
And Vanessa doesn't post on Facebook a lot about like family things like that. And I've seen this long post, and I text her, and she's like, I can't talk right now. That never stops me. So that's the kind of friendship we have. I'm still gonna text you and I'm gonna call you, and you're gonna pick up. If I gotta knock on your door and just wave at you because of COVID time, you're gonna pick up. But Vanessa and your sister are very effective. And you guys had quite a few people on that Zoom call. How was it for your dad? Um,
So I feel like since we are still in COVID times,
mhm,
I think that those things of getting together with your family are still really important. And I know it doesn't feel like it's the same with Zoom and stuff, but like you have to take what you have, right?
mhm,
So Zoom gave my dad something that, honestly, we wouldn't have been able to pull off because it was multiple states,
mhm,
multiple generations, right? So that initial call where everybody just got on the line and just told him, like, I love you. You meant
yeah,
so much to me. You've done so much in my life. You're just a generous person. You're valuable. Like, that gave him something that I think, because what is life? You want to have a life that means something.
mhm,
I mean, I guess when I'm old, I'm gonna be like my grandma, my nana. I'm gonna be like 103, right? Like when
yes,
I'm old, I want to know that I did something for people, that I had a value in their life, and that's what
mhm,
he got. He got 40 some people, 50 some people on a Zoom call saying, "You're dope. You're amazing." You
yeah,
know, you didn't have a lot of money, but that was okay.
yeah,
You still showed up. You
yes,
know,
and that is
so.
so amazing. And you said in the podcast that that gave your father something. You could see something. It gave him
Oh my
something.
God, he was like his. So he had a stroke, and by then he couldn't speak.
Mhm,
He could barely speak, and he started tearing down. A tear came down his eye, and um he he sat through it, and then afterwards he was like riled up. But I
yeah,
think also, like when people are sick, everybody comes to the hospital and they say goodbye. But in COVID, you're locked out, right?
yeah,
So you have to use your electronics. That was his opportunity to have everybody come to the hospital and say, hey, you did something.
yeah,
And it meant something. And he got charged up. And he
uh-huh.
and he couldn't calm down because I think that was like, maybe that's right, like labor, right?
Yes.
When you're going over to the other side. Because he was like, he was going over, and like I had to give him the oxygen and call the hospice nurse, and
Yeah.
they gave him some medicine. They told me to give him some medicine, and I
Mhm.
sat with him, and I could tell he was sliding over to the other side. But that was what that was, those hospital moments where everybody comes in. You just have to be creative in COVID times. You can't let people be by themselves.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
You
It's good for
can't.
us and them.
And my friend Jocelyn, who is like, I love her. Her friend who just recently passed away a couple of days ago, they did a gathering for her, a living wake, and it was so hard for her to go to that, but it meant so much, and it was so beautiful. Give them their flowers while they're here, you know. Um, let people know what you think about them, not just when they're going through or when they're transitioning over, but give them their flowers. Like, give me my flowers while I'm here. When I was diagnosed, somebody actually bought their black dress and told me that they bought their black dress. I no longer talk to that somebody, but okay. But like, people kick you out the door, and I'm not quite ready, but when it's my time, I want to know that I meant something. So after the Zoom call, how was it like being in your father's presence?
Well, I just hung out with him. Like, midnight's here. He was trying to get on the bed, and he was under the bed, and I let him sit. My dad was, I have a video my cousin sent me, he's my uncle cousin, of my dad dancing. So I was listening to soul music with him and listening to gospel music, and, just sort of hanging out with him. And these, I would think that would have been hard for me, but it isn't hard because, I'm not an emotional person. I don't like show my emotions a lot. That's the Murray in me, right? But I feel my emotions.
Yeah.
And it was okay to show or be there with him in that moment in that way.
And
Right?
and I had this similar situation with my father. For some reason, Tigger, I don't know what it is. Tigger would make him laugh. I still have that Tigger doll, and it would I just hit the button, and he would laugh, and that was our thing. I was like, what is this about? So every Christmas, I used to buy a Christmas Tigger doll. So I have it
Mm-hmm.
everywhere, and it's sometimes those small little things that you connect with when your loved one is trying to let go and want to make sure that you're happy. So I totally get about spending that time. You're not really talking about, anything, but you're in each other's space. And that's just a helpful moment. So with your father, and my Glow producer has told me we're at 50 minutes now. She keeps me on track. But I do want to talk about his actual over as a caregiver, and you being there from the time that he was diagnosed to moving him to your home, to advocating for his care, to setting up hospice, to still having to live your life in between that. And you said that your dad didn't ask for much. It wasn't like he was ringing a bell saying ding 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 food right now. Like, he was cool to be around. How was it towards the end?
um, well,
Because I know you said you're
I
not
think huh?
you're not a singer, but you were singing some
Well, I
songs.
sang. I mean,
Okay.
it was honest.
Yeah.
That's what it was. It
Oh
was
my goodness,
honest.
that's amazing. You stumped me right there. That's amazing when it's just honest and it's pure. And you always talk about someone holding your feelings, like.
Hmm.
And I asked you who was holding your feelings at that time. How did you
So
get through?
I think that was the one thing when I listened to the podcast, I said, oh my God, how could I have forgotten E? I talk to this girl every day. Right? Right?
Yeah.
I talk to my sisters, but there's a couple of things about my dad that was really important. You could tell him anything,
Yeah.
anything. I
Yeah.
guess because his past, he wasn't a judgmental person,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the second part was my friend, I could tell her anything.
Yeah.
Anything I want to tell her. If she's judging, she's doing a good job of not making me know that she's judging, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm gonna say Erica held my feelings for me, and she still does. She does it. She's done it pretty much since I was 18 years old.
Oh wow.
We've
No.
been best friends for years.
So she has been there through the loss of, your grandparents, your parents now. How has it affected your outlook on life?
Um,
Or has it affected your outlook on life? Because
I
you
don't feel the same way about death that some people do.
okay.
Death is a part of life. Nana told me that.
Mm-hmm.
When I went to see Nana, I had just had Trey, and I said, Nana, I feel bad. I can't come see you often.
Mm-hmm.
She said, and she was at the end, so she wasn't talking a lot. She said, well, she wasn't that close to the end because this lady, she lived on another bunch of years, right?
She
um,
wasn't going anywhere.
she said, everything that lives dies.
Mm-hmm.
Go if God brings it into the world, he can take care of it. I'm okay. Go take care of your son. This is the natural order of things. This is what she told me. And so, from that point forward, I've never looked at death like, oh my God, I can't. It hurts,
Yeah.
right? It hurts because I miss the person, but it doesn't feel like unnatural or scary.
And I see that as everything, like you said, that lives dies. And I see everything Anything that has died has lived, which means I can learn something about this person dying, whether it's honesty, whether it's grace, whether it's mercy, whether it's me being able to let go. Because with my brother, it was very difficult for me to let go. And with my mom, she showed me how. So when it
Mm-hmm.
was time for her to go, and I had my last conversation with her, and I knew when I left, she would not be there the next time that I came. She would not be in
Mm-hmm.
her physical mind, or I mean, in her mind and her physical body. But I learned how to love her while she was dying. You know,
Yeah, it's a gift to us.
it is a gift, and you like in my intro, I talk about how being a caregiver is a gift. It takes a lot out of you. I get that. But it's a gift. You learn a lot about yourself during those times.
It's a
So,
gift to walk with someone through the end too.
yeah. And did you ever tell your dad that it was okay that he did well? Um, it was okay to let go. Some people have a problem with saying that to their loved ones, like you're pushing them out instead of versus letting them be free and be honest and be at peace.
No, I don't have a problem with that. I told him it was fine. And I think our Zoom meeting told him that he had done what he was supposed to. So I said, you don't need to suffer.
Yeah,
Let go.
yeah,
And that's why I was there. I was trying to calm, like I was holding his hand and I was just like, just let it go. Just, just, surrender.
yeah. Oh. Whew. I'm not going to end on a heavy, heavy note because I think that is like a beautiful gift to have that with your father, to have that with your loved ones. If you could tell anybody or give any advice about being a caregiver to someone you love dearly, and what would that be? I know you gave some advice earlier. Um, oh my goodness, Vanessa says she can sing. Absolutely not. But you know what? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Vanessa is going to sing for us because your father's birthday was this week.
Oh yeah. It was on the
Yeah. So,
15th.
Vanessa, are you going to come in? Are you going to sing happy birthday to your dad for me?
Sure, I didn't do my hearing thing. I'm echoing.
And you're echoing.
I know. I said, and I'm echoing.
That's okay.
So I'll sing it really quick and then I'll go back out.
Okay.
Y'all ready? Y'all ready for this? Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday. Happy birthday, Daddy. We miss your lovely. So Mr. My dad sings too. He would always
Yes.
say happy birthday to all of us. So
Oh
I
my
took up that road. So that's all I got. I'm out.
goodness. I tell you, if there's a production, she's gonna sing. She's gonna sing. That was so awesome and all. Oh my! Sharon says, "All right, happy birthday, happy heavenly birthday." Tanisha, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on my show, my live show, my podcast. I know you're going to be coming out with your podcast soon. So once you get that up and running, we're definitely going to want to have you back because I want to talk about the mental health side of this. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, please listen to episode 9. Um, Who takes care of me? A caregiver's tale. I really do appreciate you guys listening. I appreciate everything. We also have another live coming next week. Next week is our next live. It's going to be with Jeanette Gregory, and her podcast is Podcast 10, and it's called The Gift. And I will be releasing that podcast tomorrow. So hope to see you guys next Saturday with our live, and please listen in to episode 10, The Gift. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you. It was a good show. Happy birthday. The glow doesn't define me, I define the glow.